Hello everyone, I want to start this video off by just saying if you hear any background noise, I'm so sorry. My son is in the room next door. He's 16, so he's in a voice chat with his friends playing video games. I'm sure you understand how it is. We have to find something to fill our time right now because we're all cooped up in the house and we're going to go stir crazy if we don't find something to do. You get it, I'm sure. We're all in the same boat. I'm going to jump right in by first saying that I've already recorded the sewing portion of this video and mistakes happened. But, you know, it happens. We all make mistakes occasionally. I'm not going to worry about editing it out or making another one to re-record. It is what it is. I'm just too tired. And you're probably going to see that too because I actually put the mask on and my face is in the video. No makeup. Hair's not done. It is what it is. I don't have the energy for it. We're lucky I'm still recording. Anyway, I'm going to jump right in. I've had a few messages, questions about the pattern that I'm using to make the masks that I'm making to donate. I will not be selling these. For me personally, I feel like it's a little bit of a liability issue for my business. And I don't want that. I'm still trying to get off the ground. Don't want to crash and burn before I get started. Anyway, the pattern is from craftpassion.com, and I will put a link to that in the description below the video. And this is what the mask looks like. It's got a nice shape, fits to the face, and I really like that. So we're going to scroll down the page, and there are some options here. And I don't recall these options being here when I downloaded the pattern a while back. This was what I downloaded. Did not have the seam allowance, but look at all these options you have now. You have the ordinary mask, which doesn't have the slot for a filter in these sizes with the seam allowance included. The one that I had did not have the seam allowance included. There's the pocket face mask. Now, the pocket means that it has a slot between the exterior and the lining where a filter can be inserted, or you can use a regular medical face mask slipped inside it. That's not one of the ones that are fitted to the face like the N95 mask. I mean, they also have available the SVG files for your Cricut machine and your Studio 3 files for your silhouette cutting machine. So that is really awesome for a lot of reasons. But we're going to scroll down past that to the regular sewing directions, and this is where there was some confusion come in because originally. It wasn't clear where the directions for the pocket was. So you have to scroll down past all of these other instructions for making the mask. Because you can see here, this one doesn't have that opening until you get down to here where it says Variant 1. Face mask with the pocket for filter insert. So this is the one that I'm going to be making. So I'm going to jump right in here and we'll get to it. So when you're doing your pattern pieces, I don't still have the printed pattern pieces. I used a plastic school folder, an old one, that I wasn't using anymore, and I added my seam allowance. One thing you need to note with this pattern is that it does not include seam allowance. So you're not going to cut on the line. You're going to add a 1/4 inch all the way around, and on the exterior piece, this is the exterior, and this is the teen woman's size of the pattern. The largest size, which is labeled men's, was a little too big for my face, honestly. So this is going to be my personal mask that I'm going to wear if I have to go out of the house. So you're going to add 1 inch to the end, and this part is going to be where the elastic is going to be attached inside the mask. And what I'm doing is I'm lining up this bottom edge with the grain of the fabric and then tracing around. Okay, and so we'll get into sewing once I have this cut out. The only difference is for the lining side, you're not going to have that inch. So you can see that my lining because I added the 1/4 inch seam allowance, is only 3/4 of an inch wider. So while going through my fabrics, I realized I don't really have a lot in the way of solid fabrics. So I'm going to be using this white cotton linen for the lining of my mask. So I'm just going to cut that out real quick and I'll be right back with you. All set up over here on the machine. I'm standing at my counter, so it may get a little awkward sewing right here, simply because I don't have a table for my domestic currently. I use the Juki more often than not anymore, but for this project, because it's such a lightweight fabric and it's not interfaced, my Juki would just tear right through it. So pulled out the domestic for this one. So I like to sew these, since I've been making quite a few of them, sort of assembly line fashion. And you can see here I have this is 32 pieces that are all kind of linked together because that's just how I'm sewing them. And I'm using white thread, the same color thread on all of them, no matter what color they are. I'm using the same color elastic. I ordered this elastic off Amazon. I've already cut it to length. This is a 1/64 beading elastic, and I've cut them into 8-inch lengths. Alright, so first thing we're going to do is put our pieces right side together. And I'm using a 3mm stitch length for this. And I have my needle positioned on the left side so that when I stitch, I'm getting that nice seam allowance, and I'm just keeping my fabric tucked to the edge of the presser foot. So I'm stopping there. I'm going to grab my lining pieces and just continue sewing to the bottom of that piece. I'm not concerned about back stitching right now, really, because that's going to be encased in the seam and top stitched over. Snip this apart and snip my threads. I like to snip my threads as I go, that way I don't forget them. Okay, so I'm going to slide the machine back just a smidge there and grab my snips over here. So I'm going to clip my curves. I'm going about 3/4 of an inch to an inch apart for these. This is just going to help that edge of your mask lay nice and neat. We are going to top stitch this seam allowance to one side. Okay, so hopefully I won't be bumping the camera arm or anything while I'm doing this. So what I'm going to do is open this up away from me. And I'm going to pull the seam allowance to the right. I'm going to pop that down so that on my foot here, and I hope you can see that, you probably can't because the light from the machine is so stinking bright. So the thread gap on my foot I'm going to make this a little easier. So the thread gap on my foot is on the left. And so I'm lining up the seam where it's joined. I still have red nail polish on my nail. The lining up the seam where it's joined on the left side of the foot, of the gap. And then it's going to stitch right along the seam. And as I'm sewing, I'm just going to make sure that that seam allowance stays to the right. I'm just doing a few stitches at a time, kind of holding it open. Make sure that seam allowance is staying on the right. Can we just talk about this gorgeous Witcher fabric? I'm a little bit of a nerd. This is the fabric that is going to be the flap on a Mighty Messenger very, very soon. So I'm not going to cut my thread there. Sorry, I have the sniffles a little bit. Allergies. So I'm going to do the same thing, and again, I'm going to press it toward the right. Now you'll see later when we put the two parts together that once they go together, this is going to be, they'll be facing in opposite directions. It's going to reduce the bulk there on the edge. So I'm just going to lift my presser foot, align it where I want it, and start sewing. When you're making a lot of something, doing it this assembly line fashion makes it so easy. Okay. I say that and then it wants to not cooperate. So again, I'm just pulling my seam open, making sure that seam allowance is staying on the right. I mean, if we have to wear these things, they're saying now that the CDC is going to recommend that everyone wear a fabric mask or a mask when they leave their home. There's nothing to say that we can't, you know, wear cute ones, right? There's nothing that says they have to be ugly. Helps if I push the right button, doesn't it? So now you can see there, I got a nice neat seam allowance, right, or nice neat top stitch right along that curve. All right, so when we put these right side together, oh, missed that thread there. Move my camera back so you can see. Now when I put these right sides together, you can see that this is on the left, this is on the right. So that's just going to kind of keep things from being bulky down the center of the mask. So what I'm going to do is butt those seam allowances together, or butt the seams together, so that it stays where I want it. Now you can use clips, you can use pins. I happen to have my clips here next to me. I'm going to make sure that stays, that's nice and lined up. And I'm going to clip it. I'm going to do the same thing at the bottom. Line it up so those seam allowances, or the seam, is right on top of each other and the edges are even. Actually, I need to sew from the other side. So I'm going to flip that over. So you can clip or pin here if you'd like. I didn't with a lot of the ones that I made, simply because I was trying to get them done. And I may end up actually trimming this back a little bit. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to eyeball it. I think I may have used the wrong pattern piece for that one, so it looks a little... I made a bit of a mistake here. I forgot to hem back the ends of my lining piece. And I'm going to leave my process for fixing it in the video, just in case anybody happens to make the same mistake, and I'm going to leave you with a little tip. If you ever get frustrated when you're doing something that you enjoy, like sewing or any other hobby that you have, take a deep breath, take a step back. Take a few minutes for yourself to sort of separate yourself from the problem that you're having. When you come back to it, you're going to enjoy the process a lot more, and I'm willing to bet that you'll come up with a solution when you're taking a breather. So, without further ado, we're going to keep on going, and you'll get to see me correct my mistake. There we go. That looks about right. So you can clip the sides here if you'd like. I didn't when I was making the bulk of the ones that I made. The ones that I have finished so far, at least. Simply because I was trying to get them done. So since I'm going to start on... Actually, no, I'm not starting on that side. It's one of those days, y'all. So I'm going to drop that down, drop my needle, go ahead and remove that clip, and start sewing. So normally I use the right side of my foot to line up my fabric. But for some reason, when the needle is centered, the 1/4 inch line it's on the inside of my foot, and I don't like it. I'm a weirdo. I like lining it up with the edge of the presser foot. Go figure. So I've taken to, when I'm using this particular machine, I will line it up with the left side of the foot. Unless it's like huge. And then that would be a little difficult to get all the fabric in here. It works a little better with my CS6000i because it's designed for quilting and it has that large opening here. Well, this side is a little bit easier because it's more straight lines. What I am going to do is I'm going to get to the point where the seams are against each other, and I'm going to lift my foot and pivot. There. Since that's more of an angle than a curve. Those clips are going flying. You can probably hear those. Okay, so now we have this, which is our mask, and it's inside out. So I'm going to clip my curves and the point here at the bottom and the top. So on the curve, when you're looking at it, if it's a hill, you cut a V. If it's a valley, you can just put a snip if you want. Or if it's confusing, just cut V's everywhere. And this step is important if you want a nice smooth edge. And I know those of you who have been sewing for a while are saying, why are you going into such detail? Well, because there are a lot of people who haven't been sewing for a while, and they might not know that it's important to clip those curves. And they have to learn somewhere. So most of the time when I'm explaining something, I'm going to explain it as if I'm explaining it to someone who is new to sewing. At least that's how my tutorials will be. Like the rest of you who have been sewing for forever and don't need all of the instructions can watch my first make time lapses and be like, yep, I got it. Those are the ones that I tend to watch if I need a little extra explanation. All right, so now that those are clipped, you don't have to do straight edges. Now we're going to turn it and top stitch. I am a doofus. See? See? I messed up. And forgot to hem this edge before stitching these together. I get ahead of myself when I'm trying to explain something, but that's okay. I don't have to take the whole thing apart. So this is another, thing. If you make a mistake like this, which let's face it, it happens. So I'm just going to pull about that much off of both sides. Back about 1/2 inch. And then I'm going to hem it while it's attached to the other piece. We can do that. You don't have to take it all the way off. Just a quick time-saving troubleshooting. And it'll be fixed. And yes, y'all, newbies that are watching, it doesn't matter if you've been sewing for 20-something years, you still make the occasional mistake. We're not infallible. Nobody is perfect. I'm going to iron this real quick, just so that it's easier to sew. And I'm just doing a little double fold, about 1/4 inch. So you can see that, just in case those raw edges. And it'll be folded toward the inside, which in this case is the outside, currently. All right, so I've got this folded back out of the way so I'm not accidentally stitching over it. And the reason I'm not using the thread cutter on my machine is when I found that when I start sewing again, it will bunch up on the bobbin side. So now you can see there it's hemmed nicely. Let's go ahead and stitch the other side. But the when it starts moving, the bobbin thread gets pulled back. And since it's not long, since it's still inside there, it's not long enough to pull out of the way, like I'm doing here, or to hold out of the way when you're sewing. Then I just don't use it. I found that little nest that happens on the back side to be rather annoying. Alright, so now I'm going to iron this back out and just stitch that end down. Just trimming the threads off. Here we go. So now it's ready to turn. And then from there we will top stitch. I am going to press it just to make sure that all of those seams are pushed out nicely. I'll run my finger along the inside. There's going to be a little more bulk right there, so you may have to kind of coax it out with your finger. Another good way to get those seam allowances or the seams pressed out is to roll it back and forth between your finger like this. That was one of the first things I learned way back when home ec was still a thing. Is home ec still a thing in some places now? I've heard it was and I've heard it wasn't. I think home ec is important. They probably call it something different now. All right, I'm going to iron this real quick, just so we have some nice crisp edges, because I'm picky like that. And if it looks like the seam isn't out enough while it's still warm, that steam is hot, so careful there. So that's the top edge. Alright, so now we have the basic shape of the mask, and love this fabric. See, I'm not too concerned about using white thread, because come on, the Witcher's hair is white. Alright, so let's turn this back around, and we're going to top stitch now. And this is where I will actually pull out my zipper foot from wherever I have stashed it at. Zipper foot. And I just find top stitching to be easier with the zipper foot, to be completely honest. So I do need to move with this machine, every time you move the needle, you have to reset your stitch length. So I'm going to keep it at a 3mm. Actually, you know what, I'm going to go to a 3.5 for top stitching, and I'm going to line the edge of the fabric up with the edge of the zipper foot, the front edge. I'm not back stitching because that's all going to get folded over under. If this were a structural seam, I'd be like, oh yeah, gotta back stitch that. There we go, that's the top stitching on the upper portion. And now we'll do the lower. And just like I did with sewing this part together, when I get to that middle part, I'm going to lift and pivot. I'm going to trim all these little threads because that's going to drive me nuts. I think I can show you here. Nope, I guess not. It didn't do it like I thought it had. I thought I had pulled it back and did that little nesting thing that it likes to do on the back side. Alright, so the next thing I want to do, I'll go ahead and turn it back over here to the ironing mat, is I'm going to fold this in once, and then I'm going to fold it in again until it butts up against the edge of that opening. I don't want it to cross the opening, just butt up against it. And this is going to create the channel that the elastic is going to sit in. And another little quick tip that I'm going to show you is I put the elastic in there and then sew, and then tie it. Simply because I find it easier that way. That's really hot on the fingers. I don't know why fabric likes getting stuck in the little holes on the back of my iron. It's a cheap iron. Probably doesn't help that the cord is kind of hung up over there. Okay. So now what I'm going to do, let's grab a couple of clips and a couple of my pieces of elastic. Just 2. I don't have 3 ears. So I'm going to take my elastic and tuck it right up in that, right along the edge. And just stick a clip on there to hold it in place. Same with this side. I'm going to take my piece of elastic and tuck it right up in the edge. So if you don't have elastic, because apparently there's been a pretty big shortage. I guess I managed to get mine before it ran out on Amazon. Let's turn this back over here. There are other things that you can do. You can use bias tape and just trim it down a little bit. Sew the bias tape on from one end to the other. Leave a tail on both ends and use that to tie it off. You can use twill tape, which is amazing for ties like this. You can use grosgrain ribbon if that's what you've got. So I'm just holding this out of the way and making sure that that elastic stays tucked up in there. And I'm trying to center my seam on the foot. I could put my other foot back. Actually, you know what? I'm going to switch the feet out. And move my needle position back over. Yeah, this will work nicely. So I'm going to butt the edge of my presser foot up against the elastic, which has decided to scooch itself up underneath there. There we go. And that should put my seam right along the edge of this. I am back stitching. Now, I'm going to use my little button on my presser foot here, and that's going to help level out the foot so that it'll feed easily. There we go. And something else that keeping the foot aligned up against the elastic does is make sure that your seam is the same distance from the edge of the fabric all the way down. Now, normally I would sew this from something like this from the other side, but because, you know, it's visible, but you can't really tell that there's... This thread's small. It's an all-purpose thread. Standard issue kind of stuff. It's not the big bulky thread that I use on the Juki, so I'm not really worried. That, and it's going on my face. I'm going to lift my foot, use my button. There we go. And there we go. The sewing portion is complete. Just going to clip these threads. See, I had a little bit of nesting there. Okay, I'm going to move the machine out of the way. I can actually shut that off. So now I'm just going to take my ends here. I can show you here, this is where your filter will be inserted, or your other mask, and I like the shape of these. It fits the face nicely. So I just pull it back. Take it through. I like to make sure my ends are even. And I'm not just going to pull it tight, I'm going to push the knot up with my fingers. And then pull it with the other hand. I can actually trim that down a little bit. And then what I'm going to do is look and see which end sort of looks a little bit bigger for the opening. And then I'm going to attempt to pull the knot into the channel. If your channel is too small to pull the knot through, it's not that big a deal. I just don't want the knot on the outside. If you don't have fingernails, you can use pliers, tweezers, whatever you've got. There we go. She's on the inside now. And there we have our little strap that goes in the ear. I'm going to tie the other side up. Now when you're pulling this through, it can be a little easier if you turn it so the knot is facing the mask, or the body of the mask. Just because it'll be a little bit easier for it to go over this portion. If I can get a hold of it. I'm going to grab my tweezers, or not tweezers, but my round nose pliers. These are jewelry pliers. There we go. You can just grab it and kind of pull it over. There we go. Now our knot is on the inside. It doesn't have to be centered or anything like that. But there we go. There's our mask, and it will fold flat. And lay just like that. It'd be nice if my camera would stay focused, right? So there we go. One linen-lined Witcher cloth face mask is complete. I'm going to try this on. And it fits nicely. Okay, so there we are. One Witcher fabric face mask. I will put a link to the pattern in the description box below, and hopefully that helps any of you who might have been struggling a little bit with making this mask be able to get through it and make you feel a little more comfortable about going out in public, and as a gentle reminder, you know, not to touch your face and things like that. So I will see you all next time. Have a great week. Stay safe, and if you don't absolutely have to go out, stay home. I love your faces, and I will see you next time.